welcome back to another episode of the From the Farmyard podcast. Today we are going to be talking about cut flowers and how you can incorporate that into your gardening space. Or if you just want to do flowers, we're going to be doing that too. We're going to be going over a bunch of questions, our favorite flowers, what we've grown, what we want to grow, things that we won't grow again because they're not good for arrangements, and other things that we're just going to grow because they look kind of cool. So let's get into it.
So the first thing I want to start with is I'm going to start in my flower garden because my flower garden did probably the best out of all three of my gardens this year. And maybe it's just because it's new and it's just really nice. But flowers, they just did really well. And I got to say my favorite flower that I grew out of my whole garden, it's between two. It's got to be sunflowers or zinnias, but I really, really like the zinnias. I'm not going to lie. I really like them. They just did so well. And I think next year for sure, that's something I'm going to be growing again because they produced a lot. And for someone who likes to put flowers in a vase and stuff, they last a very long time in a vase. It's really cool. So those are probably my favorite, those two. Zinnias, definitely growing again. Sunflowers, always. I will always grow sunflowers. They just have a special place in my heart. I just love sunflowers. Do you love sunflowers?
I freaking love them.
I know you love sunflowers. We love sunflowers.
It's a mutual thing.
Yeah, it's a mutual thing. I like the forget-me-nots. They produced a little later in the season, but they did really well. So I like those forget-me-nots. There's a couple things that I learned this year, and obviously gardening is a learning thing. I put a bunch of plants in my garden, and now looking at it, it's really chaotic. It's really crowded. There's some things that did really well in that crowdedness, but there's other things where it's just oh, you definitely needed more space. So the things that needed more space would be my snapdragons, my the baby's breath, that needed more space. It kind of just got flattened out by all the other plants and it just kind of rotted and wilted away. And then the coxcomb as well. It needed more growing space because once I planted, what happened is in the coming garden tour, you'll see it. I planted morning glories and then I planted cosmos and then the coxcomb was in the middle. And the coxcomb only gets a foot tall, whereas the cosmos are they're about as tall as me. I'm not very tall, y'all, but they're about as tall as me. And the morning glories, they just go everywhere. So stuff like that, I'm gonna try those again. The baby's breath, the coxcomb, and the snapdragons. But I think I'm gonna put them in a bed together because they're shorter and they could just use more space. So right there's something that I learned this year. That didn't really work out well, but next year I'm going to try again and I'm going to try to do it better than I did this year. And that's what gardening is. That's what it really is. It's looking at what happened this year and been oh, yeah, that definitely needs changed. What can I do to better that, to better the growing, to better the plants being as prolific as they are? How do I do this better? You can always do better than what you did before. And you'll really cultivate a much better plan than what you originally had.
And I think that's what people need to do. I mean, if you don't like something one year, try growing it again in a different way, either using a trellis, if it can be trellised, or you're moving plants around because you saw how they were this year. Always try doing that and at least grow things twice, unless you're, in the case of fruits, if you really get something you're I really just didn't like the taste of that, don't grow it again. You don't have to grow it just because somebody else did. I think that's where a lot of people get caught up is they're oh, well, my friend's growing 900 tomato plants. I need to grow some tomato plants. If you don't like tomatoes, if you're not going to eat tomatoes, if you're not going to can or preserve tomatoes, don't use them. Grow something that your family is going to like. If you guys eat a lot of lettuce, plant lettuce. A lot of green beans, plant a lot of green beans.
And that's something that I did this year. I saw people planting these different types of plants. I thought, oh, I'll give them a try because I saw other people doing it. And I heard good things about them, but I grew them and I didn't really care for them. but it was a learning experience. I wouldn't know what that tasted like. Like, let's give an example, ground cherries. I grew them. Gonna be honest, they're not my favorite taste ever. It's a really weird. Here's how I best describe this. It's a ground cherry, right? So it tastes like the combination of a tomato, a grape, and a cherry all combined into one fruit. But what really throws it off, see the grape and cherry, I could totally get behind that. That's okay. It's that tomato part that just really throws it off, man. It's just
You,
it's not
I
good.
think everybody should do it, and I'm still, my brain's working, but she
Go
just
for
doesn't
it.
like tomatoes. So
Put it
anything
in the
with tomatoes,
comments. Mater
she's
hater.
a Mater hater. So please leave that in the comments. So, no, I tomatoes are definitely more of an acquired taste, or some people are just born liking them.
You.
It's been in generations of my family. My mom remembers sitting out in my great grandfather's tomato field, and he had hundreds of plants, and she would just sit there with a little salt shaker eating the tomatoes right out of the garden, walking through the rows. And it's just, I wasn't there for that, but I started doing that like really young. I was like 3 or 4, and I was doing that. So, but it's for someone who doesn't like tomatoes, that can really throw it off. And I understand why you don't like it, but I'm not hating on you. No hate.
Uh-huh.
You're just a Mater hater, but that doesn't mean that I hate you.
Uh-huh. No, this guy could chow down on a whole 5 gallon bucket of tomatoes. He's done it. I know he's done it. You've done it.
3 or 4
Definitely.
pounds I put away
Yeah.
in a day, one
Yeah, it's
sitting. I did that like 5 days in a row. It was glorious.
I don't understand how I would not feel good. I would not feel good. Oh my gosh. But yeah, ground cherry is something that I saw people doing and I thought, yeah, I'll give it a try. But I didn't really care for it. So next year, I'm not gonna grow those because I didn't like the way they tasted.
I have a
Okay.
question.
You can
Since
go.
you are more doing things for the vases and bouquets and things, which flowers would you recommend to someone starting out
Oh,
to grow
that's it.
for a lovely arrangement?
Okay. That's a good question. Um, so from my experience of everything I grew, so let's just go over real quick again. Zinnias, sunflowers, forget-me-nots, baby's breath, dahlias, lupin, coxcomb, cosmos, snapdragons, and morning glories. Morning glories, obviously, those are just for those that you don't really use those in. I didn't use them. Ooh, and I grew some wildflowers. I just took a bunch of seeds and kind of just threw them in this one area, but there's like a couple of flowers from that I really liked. But if I'm gonna make a bouquet, zinnias are probably my go-to because again, they last a long time. I like the baby's breath as well. It's a very gentle kind of pop. I do like those and they last. Lupin, I'm not growing those again because the petals just fell off and it just like the pollen, everything, it just kind of fell apart. It doesn't do well in a vase. So right there, learned from that. I'm not going to be growing lupin next year because it didn't work for my needs. Snapdragons, those do really well in a vase. So I'm going to grow those again because they also looked cool. Um, Forget me nots from the experience that I've done. I've only done it a couple times in bouquets, but they seem to work okay. Sunflowers. Whenever I put my sunflowers in a vase, they wilt really quickly. And that's just what happens to me whenever I do sunflowers. So if I'm gonna make a bouquet, I like to do sunflowers, but a lot of the times they just end up like the pollen all falls out and it just makes a mess, and then the leaves, the petals fall off. So I like to do it because it's like a big one. And when you're making bouquets, you want to have the small, you want to have the upright, you want to have the big, the medium, just to really bring it all together. And I like to do that big, but with my experience with them, I've had to use other things like dahlias. Dahlias work okay. They they don't wilt, but what happens is with my experience, the way their stems go, they split and I like just the one stem. it's easier to handle, and when they split like that, it's really hard to arrange. So when they split, it's typically one open one and one bud. And so I typically keep the split, but it's hard to arrange with. So like my go-to, I'm gonna have to say it would be snapdragons, zinnias, and baby's breath. And I think that in itself makes a really cool arrangement. That in itself just
Yeah.
kind of, because you got your upright, you've got your small, and some zinnias get really big, others are really small. So like right there, you
Mhm.
could have a whole arrangement just in those three flowers.
And there's
Forget me
different
nots.
colors, just
Right,
one
right.
color.
Um, calendula, you can do calendula, you can do bachelor button is really cool because bachelor button almost looks like it's got the little like pom pom flowers, like they're cool. But then it's also got like the leaves. I think it's a bachelor button. I think that's what popped up in my garden. That's what it looked like.
Mhm.
But then the leaves on them, it's really green. And whenever you're making bouquets as well, you want that green. So I like using those also because it adds to. But this is only my first year doing flowers. And just from my experience, that's what I would go with. But this is not a
Little,
flower episode.
it's not, but a little glimpse into the future with talking about flowers and stuff. We're going to be having people on the podcast who know more about flowers and who are going to be teaching both of us as well as teaching you guys different arrangements, what like little tips and tricks that they've learned in their journey. But
Mm-hmm. So yeah,
more on garden harvest.
yeah. Okay, you go now because I took too long on the flowers. We gotta keep going with the garden stuff.
You're good. The flowers that I'm going to be growing again, obviously, zinnias, sunflowers, and marigolds. I'm going to be doing a series of why I'm growing marigolds. I don't particularly. I like the way they look. They just take so long to flower that it's like it's such a waste because I planted ones in April and they're just now flowering. And it's like zinnias were ready to go in like 40 days and the marigolds are still going. But I'll still continue to grow them because of the history with them. The sunflowers, I just have a thing for sunflowers, but I'm always going to grow sunflowers. The mammoth Russians are ones that I'm always going to do. I always grow one or ones on the four corners of my arch trellis just because I like the height that it gives. And then I do which I don't have a lot right now because things have died. I've not been in the garden as much as I've needed to be, succession planning. But autumn beauties, I'm going to grow again just because of the way they look and they're beautiful flowers. All types of sunflowers. I'm doing a strawberry blonde next year that's going to be I'm really looking forward to that one. And a few other doubles and multiple heads on sunflowers, a whole bunch of things. And I want to try cosmos next year. I haven't grown them before, but I have a area that I would like to dedicate for cosmos. And I'm pretty sure they reseed, so I don't necessarily want to have that right in my garden. Reagan.
See, cosmos, I grew them this year. They're nice. They are nice. They're really cool looking. But like the only reason I would use cosmos is literally just to look at. Again, the reason I have
Yeah.
my fresh cut flower garden is for cutting purposes. And when it comes
Hmm.
to the cosmos, the petals fell off of those as well. What I noticed. They're pretty though. They're really pretty. Like they grow, like I said, they're as tall as me. They're about 5 foot. That's not as tall as me, guys. I'm a little taller than that, but like they're about 5 foot. Um, they actually may be a little bit taller than 5 foot. I don't really know. I haven't measured them. I just walk in there and it's really tall. I'm like consumed by the cosmos.
But if you had a nice place, I feel like that would be a nice thing to just throw in.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you had an area that you weren't really using for anything, just throw flowers and cosmos. Reagan's done and what I've done in the past, I didn't do this year, is just open a whole bunch of seed packets, put them into a little jar, bin, whatever, mix them all around, and then just let them fly.
It's literally it works. Like you just don't know what to put there. Mix it all up and ooh, what? And you just sprinkle it around.
Oh, and nasturtiums. I
Yeah.
will grow nasturtiums again, just they look really cool, but
Mm-hmm.
also they're trap crop, which I'm pretty sure we've talked about the trap crops before. And in my experience, I had my squash plants too close to each other, and then I had it right in the middle. So it was like everything was going to that, but then it was getting onto the leaves of the other things. So I'm going to spread them out a little bit more, and continue to grow nasturtiums. The flowers are also edible. They're really good in salads. I had a few salads with them in it. It takes a little adjusting to, but like it's really good. So highly recommend that.
See, I'm not gonna eat a flower. I just
It's
can't.
an edible flower.
I know, but like I every time I go up to these flowers, right? I smell them. I just think it smells like a porta potty. Like that's just what I think it smells like. If you smell it, tell me, tell me I'm wrong. Come on, like go
They
smell some
they do smell a
nasturtium.
little weird, but not. I wouldn't call it that.
It smells like a porta potty. Like
They smell a little weird.
not like the like stanky porta potty. We're talking like the smell that comes with porta potty. Like whatever that blue stuff is, whatever that is, that smell. That's what it smells like.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
Not the crap, not
it's
that.
very
The
similar to that,
blue
but
stuff.
not. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I wouldn't
Um,
eat that on a salad. Not if they smelled like that.
I don't really think I grew any other flowers.
Mm-mm.
What I would say is because I have grown things in raised beds and pools and buckets. The buckets and the raised beds and in the ground did better for me in the long run. The ones in the bucket, they are in the kiddie pool, they were a little not stunted. It's probably because I wasn't watering enough, but that's on me. But I mean, they were a little stunted, if I'm being honest. They just didn't do as well. They still flowered, just not as much or as vibrantly. So, simple fix for that is add more depth, cut the bottom out of your kiddie pool and dig down a little bit and just let them go right into the ground. I think that would be really good. I've seen people bury them up to little the little thing, the outer rim, and put them down in the ground like that. And that's a really good idea, especially if you want to add more height and you just want to have like little edging, like a different sort of edging, obviously. But
So a lot of times there's a couple different questions that are asked when it comes to flower gardening. Like how much space do I need to flower garden? Or what seeds, what flowers should I get to flower garden? What are annuals? What are perennials? So let's just answer a couple of those quickly. First, let's go over annuals and perennials, what those are. It's pretty simple. Perennials, you plant them and they come back every year. Typically, unless there's like something that killed them off. But typically, perennials, they come back. It's a reoccurring plant. Annuals, they get planted every year. So let's give an example. Zinnias are an annual. You have to plant them every year because the seed has to come up. But example for a perennial, let's do daisies. Shasta daisies. I know I have a seed pack and it says perennials. You plant them, they should come back every year unless there is like a disease or something killed them off. So there's a simple explanation of what perennials are, what annuals are. If you know, if you plant these perennials and you really like daisies, you know that's going to be good for fresh cut. Those will be good. Or Rebecca, that'll be good for that. Or sage, that'll be good for coming back every year. Those are three examples of perennials. You plant those, but they're going to stay there. They have to stay there because they're going to continually come back every year. Or when it comes to annuals, it's got a lot more free of choice. So you can plant zinnias one year and say, oh, those did good, but I think I'd like to plant something different. That gives you the freedom of choice to decide, yeah, those did okay, but I think I'd like to do something different.
Yeah. And there are some that they consider annuals that will come back every year like a perennial, but it's really not the same plant coming back or surviving with like the root system or regrowing from old growth. It's just reseeding itself, which that's still
Mm-hmm.
an annual, but they come back every year. And one of the most notable ones is um, Cosmos. Another
Mm-hmm.
one is zinnias. Sunflowers will do it if the seeds fall and nothing eats them. But yeah, just some examples of things that will reseed. Cosmos are really bad about it, I'm pretty sure, where they will continually reseed year after year.
So, next question, what flowers should I plant? Okay, so first of all, that's entirely up to you. That's if you see a flower and you like it, go for it. But I think when people ask this question, what flowers should I plant? I think they're talking about which flowers should I plant in my area. So let's talk about your area for a sec. If you're planting flowers, you need to know your frost dates and you need to know how long your season is. So look up your zones. What zone are you in? And from that, you should be able to find your frost dates, your growing season, what that all looks like. We talked about this before. It is really helpful when it comes to gardening, knowing
Yeah.
how long of a time you have. Because I know my garden season is coming to a close. My first frost date is going to be the end of this month. So I know it's creeping up on me. So I know that I can't plan anything else. At this point, it's survival of the fittest. So with that knowledge, I live up north, right? My growing season is a lot shorter than Zachary's growing season.
I
Zachary
have like
could
280 days.
exactly. I do not. Zachary could plant flowers probably 2 times and he could get like a harvest. Let's just give an example like that. I'm not saying you could, but like let's just say
Yeah.
that. Your growing season is a lot longer than mine. Mine's one and done. If it doesn't come up,
I can plant zinnias at least 3 times and a bunch of heads from each flower. I've done it
right.
before.
Right. So looking at your frost date and then looking at your seeds and being like, oh, do these flowers handle these cold temps well? Is it going to be able to handle a light frost? Is it going to be able to handle not a lot of sun, a lot of sun? Looking at the seeds and comparing it with your frost dates and your zones and stuff is super helpful. And then from there, picking what works for you. And then after that, it is really grow something and see if you like it, see how it does. If it didn't do well, try something else next year. And that's really what it is.
Yeah.
So when it comes to deciding what flowers you're going to do, for your garden, it's completely up to you. But I think when people ask that question, I think they mean looking at their frost dates and stuff. So definitely do that. Look at that and see what that looks like
Yeah.
with your seeds.
And it's also what flowers, but we've talked about this earlier in the episode, is what flowers are you going to be using? Like, you're going to be using them for cut flowers. Like Reagan said, cosmos weren't good for, weren't the best for arrangements. It could
Mm-hmm.
be done, but not. I'm going to grow them next year just because I want to try them first off, but also just like as a filler for an area,
Right.
or if she might want to grow them for a filler in an area, but they're not going to be best for that. So if you just look around, do some research, and figure out the main point here, Google is your best friend when you are looking these things up. You can put in a quick search online. When is my frost date for my zip code? I won't say that because obviously, but
It's
like,
your zip code.
what is frost date for your zip you
Yeah.
can also do how many days are from your first frost date to your last frost date. I have around 280, so I know that I could plant tomatoes twice if I wanted to and still get a bunch of tomatoes. I can plant cucumbers and beans 5 or 6 times and still get a decent harvest off each one. So it's just
Right.
looking up those, and Google is your best friend. Also, putting things in your calendar as to when you need to plant something, when you need to replant something, things like that, and then just you get a reminder on your phone.
Mm-hmm.
It's really simple. That's what I do.
So the last question we're going to talk about is how much space do I need to grow flowers? It really depends on what you're growing. That's
Yeah.
it really depends on what you're growing. From my experience, like I talked about, there's some things that I learned this year that needed more space. And next year, I'm going to do better at that. It's all, I think the take home from this is it's all a learning experience. It really is. It's growing it and then seeing. That's what I did. I just put seeds in the ground. I grow things because this is my, I'm giving, this is from my experience. This whole episode from my experience. I've only grown flowers for one season, and that's this season. But I've learned a lot, and I'm going to better it for next year because from my experiences, I know that baby's breath, snapdragons, lupin, coxcomb, stuff like that, they need more space. They can't be shut in by cosmos that tower over them. It doesn't give them enough room to grow. So that right there,
Yeah.
from my experience, from what happened with my plants, I know I'm going to dedicate one whole bed to those plants that only grow a foot tall. So you know what I mean? Like I didn't know that originally that those only grew a foot tall. I thought the snapdragons grew a lot taller than that. But maybe they could have grown a lot taller than that because they were, closed in by the cosmos. It really is, gardening is all an experience. And you do it
Yeah.
one
You're
year.
never gonna get it in the first one.
Exactly.
You're gonna continually learn things. It's gonna build on everything that you've done. I would say by year 4, between year 4 and 6, you're gonna have a decent understanding to, well, even before that, but I say 4 and 6 years growing, whatever, you're gonna be like, oh, I got this down. But you're always gonna learn with it. You're never, there's gonna be years that throw some people off. There's been people who garden for 30 plus years and they always get at least 1 or 2 things a season. They're like, I don't know what happened here. The plant does bad. It could have been anything, but it didn't affect other plants, so could have been anything, honestly.
Right. So like I said, I
But
think
with
that.
space, also,
No, go ahead.
you go,
No, go.
you go.
No.
With space, it what do you want to do? I mean, do you have a few extra raised beds that you want to throw into? Do you have an in-ground space that you want to do? Do you have kiddie pools that you just want to fill up to the brim with zinnias and let them fully explode? And with zinnias, I will say, if you plant closer together, they don't get as tall and they just stay small. But if you allow them that space, they will grow into 4 foot tall plants that are probably 3 foot wide and they'll grow. But you can till up an area in your yard and put seeds. You could anything, a whole 10-acre field, go for a 10-acre field.
Mm-hmm.
Just that's a big space. Take
Yeah.
a lot of seed, but it's gonna be glorious.
And
Highly
and
recommend.
and
Never done that.
right. And I liked what you said. It literally is, what do you want to do? What is it that you want to do with your flowers? What is the grand picture of it all? See, for me it was fresh cut. I was going to use them for bouquets, right? I learned this year that some things didn't work as well as other things did, but I know for next year.
Yeah,
What do you
and
want
now
to
she can
do?
grow more of
Mm-hmm.
like zinnias. She can grow a bunch more zinnia plants and have even more bouquets. It's just
Right.
figuring out what works.
Because it worked best for me, for what I wanted to do. So I think to ow, to tie this all together to end this, um, what is it you want to do? What do you want to do with your space? What do you want to grow? And I challenge you to go for it. Go for it because we all have an idea at first. And I know I did for my flower garden. I had an idea in my mind, random idea, and I decided I'd like to see this picture come true. And I took that idea and I ran with it. And now I have this massive flower garden that's very large, very chaotic, very full, but it's beautiful. And it's the
Yeah.
exact idea that I had because it's something that I wanted to do and I did it. And I think, and I want to challenge you guys to chase after what you want to do. It may not work out the first year, but you're always going to better it in the years to come just from
Yeah.
experience.
It's following your passions. I did a video on that well, whenever this goes out, I really don't know. Recently, I've done a video on my channel of that, and it's might not be like the exact job that you want at first. You might only see it as a hobby, but you want it to grow into something else. Take the risk. whether that's buying more property to do cut flowers or things like that. Take that risk and just follow your passions and don't listen to people because people are going to criticize you and people are going to say, "Oh, that's a crazy talent or that's a crazy gift. You're never going to make money with that or it's going to be something that you're probably never going to use, whatever." People do amazing things and people shouldn't not hate but criticize as much as they do because that can really destroy one's own ability to believe in themselves. But we're here believing in you. So go out, grow your garden, get
You
a
do
10
you.
acre property, and do what you see fit.
And if you do get a 10-acre property and you plant a bunch of flowers, if you were inspired by us saying that, please take a picture and send it to us. Please.
I guess.
I'd love to see that. So, and then
Or if you're excited about that big pumpkin or that big whatever, and everybody's just like, oh, that like they're not very impressed with it, send it to us or tag us in a picture, and we will love that thing to death.
mhm.
We are avid gardeners. We love all
Yeah.
the things like that.
So, if you have anything else you want to learn about, or if this video helped you out, let us know in the comments below. We love to hear our viewers' suggestions because ultimately, the reason we're here is to educate you guys and teach you more about gardening, growing, homesteading, farming in general. That's who we are. We want to teach you things from the farmyard, and that's what we're here for. So, if you have any suggestions, any video ideas that you'd like to see us talk about, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. We'll get back to you for sure. But we hope this video helped you out. We hope it inspired you. If it did inspire you, send us pictures of your garden. We're on Instagram. Show us your garden. We'd love to see it. We love to see other people's gardens, what they do. Maybe it'll inspire us to do something different. You never know.
And maybe we can
So,
share those ideas to inspire other people as well.
exactly. So, we're here for you guys. Get out there, grow a garden, and we'll see you all in the next one.
Bye, y'all.